The first time Jack Harris met a human, he nearly died. Not from any violent action on the human's part, the diplomatic envoy from Earth had been perfectly polite, but from sheer shock to his body. As High Chancellor of the Galactic Concord, Jack had greeted hundreds of different alien species during his 60-cycle career. The Concord included worlds across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy and had over 400 thinking species. All these species had evolved on worlds with similar gravity, radiation, air, and temperature. Scientists believed these narrow conditions were necessary for complex life to grow and thrive. Then humans made contact. "Sir, your emergency medicine," his helper Laurie Peterson whispered, seeing how pale he became as the human group walked through the airlock. The Earth people wore no special suits, another surprise to the watching officials. Jack fumbled with the medical device at his neck. A cool wave of chemicals spread through his body, fighting against his natural urge to run away from the humans. Later, scientists would explain why this happened. Humans had evolved on a death world with conditions so harsh that other thinking species could barely stay alive there. Because of this, humans had developed into top hunters with strong muscles, amazing staying power, and aggressive traits that made most galactic species feel deeply threatened. "High Chancellor Harris," said the human ambassador Greg Moore, holding out his hand in their traditional greeting. "On behalf of Earth, we are honored to join the galactic community." Jack forced himself to be brave and took the human's hand, the first of many difficult diplomatic moments to come. The meeting room had been carefully prepared. The air mix matched Earth standard, which thankfully was within tolerable limits for most conquered species. The gravity had been set slightly lower than human normal, to help the visitors feel comfortable while not distressing the Concord representatives too much. Jack led Ambassador Moore and his team to the large round table. The human delegation included 5 members, Moore himself, 2 scientists, a military officer, and a cultural specialist. All wore simple blue uniforms with Earth's symbol, a circle of stars surrounding their home planet. "We have prepared information packets about the Concord," Jack said, his voice slightly shaky despite the medicine flowing through his system. "They contain basic details about our member worlds, governance structure, and shared technologies." "Thanks, you," Moore replied with what humans called a smile. To Jack, the expression revealed too many teeth and triggered another wave of instinctive fear that the medicine barely controlled. For the next 3 hours, both sides shared information. The humans described their solar system, their short but impressive technological progress, and their eagerness to join the wider galactic community. Jack and the other Concord officials spoke about trade possibilities, cultural exchange programs, and the protection the Concord could offer a newly spacefaring species. Throughout the meeting, Jack noticed something odd. The humans seemed completely unaware of how frightening they were. They moved suddenly, spoke loudly, and occasionally slapped their hands on the table for emphasis, actions that made several Concord representatives flinch or freeze in terror. When they broke for refreshments, Jack pulled Laurie aside. "Why are they like this?" he whispered, increasing his medicine dose again. "Don't they realize how they appear to us?" Laurie, who had studied the advance information more thoroughly, shook her head. "Their planet has over 50 predator species that hunt using different methods. Humans evolved to fear nothing except each other. They don't understand that to us, they look like the most dangerous hunters we've ever seen." This explanation did little to comfort Jack as he watched Greg Moore easily lift a heavy drink dispenser that would have required 2 or 3 Concord beings to move. The casual display of strength sent ripples of unease through the gathered officials. Back in his private office after the meeting, Jack met with Dr. Samantha Wright, the Concord's chief expert on alien biology. "Well," he asked, finally allowing his body to tremble now that the humans were safely back on their ship. "What's your assessment?" Samantha looked troubled. "They're remarkable. Their planet has gravity 30% stronger than standard, radiation, levels that would cause cancer in most of us, atmospheric pressure that would crush some species, temperature swings of over 100 degrees, and regular natural disasters we can barely imagine." "And they evolved there naturally?" Jack asked. "Yes. Their bodies are dense with muscle and their bones are incredibly strong. They can run for hours without rest. They can survive injuries that would kill most of us instantly. Their reaction time is nearly twice as fast as our quickest species. Jack collapsed into his chair. They're monsters. No, Samantha corrected him. They're survivors. And based on my initial studies, they're actually trying to be gentle. The ambassador was consciously moving slowly and speaking softly. They're aware they might seem intimidating to smaller species. Not intimidating, Jack said. Terrifying. Half the council needed double doses of stabilizer just to stay in the room with them. Samantha activated her data pad and projected an image of the human brain. This is where it gets interesting. Despite their physical capabilities, humans have evolved remarkable self-control. They're predators who chose to become builders and thinkers. Their history shows violent tendencies, yes, but also incredible cooperation, art, philosophy, and science. Your point? Jack asked wearily. My point is that they want to join us, not conquer us, but our biological fear response is going to make meaningful diplomacy impossible unless we find a better solution than emergency stabilizers. Jack looked at the human brain rotating in the projection. What do you suggest? I need 2 weeks and full access to the medical research facility, Samantha said confidently. I believe I can develop a compound that doesn't just suppress our fear response but actually rewires how our brains perceive humans. Not just a mask for our instincts, but a window through them. Side effects? Unknown until testing, but without something. The conquered will never accept humans as full members, no matter how peaceful their intentions. We'll always see them as predators first. Jack thought about the trade possibilities, cultural exchanges, and especially the military strength humans could bring to the conquered's sometimes threatened borders. It would be worth almost any risk. You have 1 week, he said firmly. The full council meets the humans then, and I want your solution ready. As Samantha left, Jack looked out his viewport at the stars. Somewhere out there, Earth orbited an average yellow star, a death trap of a planet that had somehow produced beings of incredible strength, endurance, and intelligence. Beings that now wanted to join the galactic community. For the good of the conquered, he would find a way to work with these humans, even if it meant changing how his own brain worked to do it. 1 week passed quickly. Jack Harris paced nervously in his office while waiting for Dr. Samantha Wright to arrive. The full Concord Council meeting with the human delegation was scheduled for tomorrow, and he needed good news. The door slid open, and Samantha walked in. Her fur was messy and the skin around her eyes looked dark from lack of sleep, but she was smiling. In her hands she carried a small case. You found something? Jack asked hopefully. I did, Samantha said, placing the case on his desk and opening it. Inside were several rows of small blue pills. I call it perspective. Jack picked up one of the pills and examined it. This doesn't look very impressive for a week of nonstop work. Don't let its simple appearance fool you, Samantha replied. This isn't just an improved stabilizer, it's completely different. She activated the room's display screen and showed brain scans. The current stabilizers only block immediate fear responses. They're like putting a blanket over a fire alarm. The danger sensing is still happening, but the reaction is muffled. And this new drug? Perspective temporarily changes how our brains process human features. Instead of seeing them as predators, we see them as people. Different, yes, but not threatening. Samantha's eyes shined with excitement. I've tested it myself. Jack looked surprised. You met with the humans without authorization? I needed to verify it worked, she said without apology. I spoke with Ambassador Moore for over an hour with no fear response at all. We had a fascinating conversation about Earth music. Jack studied her carefully. Side effects? Minor headache afterward. Slightly elevated heart rate, nothing serious for short exposures. She hesitated. I wouldn't recommend using it for more than 6 hours at a time, and we need more data on repeated use. Is it safe enough for the council meeting? Yes. I've prepared enough for all 26 species representatives. She closed the case. Each dose is calibrated for different biologies. The effect lasts about 8 hours. Jack made his decision. Prepare doses for distribution tomorrow morning. Attendance will be optional for any representative not comfortable with taking an experimental compound. Yes, sir. Samantha handed him a single pill. You might want to try it tonight. It helps to have some time to adjust to the new perspective before important negotiations. After Samantha left, Jack stared at the small blue pill in his palm. His career had been built on careful diplomacy and calculated risks. This was certainly a risk, but the potential reward, successful integration of humans into the conquered, was worth it. He swallowed the pill with a sip of water. For several minutes, nothing happened. Then, slowly, a warm feeling spread through his mind. It wasn't like the cool artificial calm of the stabilizers. This felt more natural, like the gradual lifting of a fog he hadn't realized was there. Jack brought up an image of Ambassador Moore on his screen. Usually, even looking at a human picture caused a slight unease in his stomach. Now, he noticed different things. Yes, the human was larger and more densely muscled than most conquered species. Yes, those hands could probably crush Jack's bones without much effort. But instead of triggering fear, these observations were simply facts, like noting the color of someone's eyes. He found himself noticing the intelligence in Moore's expression, the careful way the human held himself to appear less threatening, the genuine enthusiasm in his smile. For the first time, Jack saw the human as a person, rather than a predator. The next morning, the Conquered Council gathered in the main chamber. Jack personally explained the new drug to each representative. Most agreed to try it, though a few declined and instead took their usual stabilizers. The human delegation arrived punctually. As they entered, Jack watched the council members' reactions. Those who had taken perspective showed interest and curiosity. Those on traditional stabilizers still appeared tense and uncomfortable. Ambassador Moore, Jack said, extending his hand in the human greeting style, welcome to the full Conquered Council. Greg Moore looked surprised at Jack's relaxed demeanor. Thank you, High Chancellor. Your hospitality is appreciated. The meeting progressed smoothly. Free from their instinctive fear, the council members engaged with the humans on substantive issues, trade agreements, technology exchange, and cultural understanding. The humans, sensing the change in atmosphere, responded with increasing openness. During a break, Ambassador Moore approached Jack privately. Something's different today, he said. Your people seem more comfortable with us. Jack hesitated, then decided on honesty. We've developed a compound that helps us see past our instinctive responses to your species. Moore raised his eyebrows. You're drugging yourselves to talk to us? In a manner of speaking, Jack admitted. But not to dull our senses or judgment, rather to enhance our perception. To see you as you truly are, not as our evolutionary history makes us believe you are. The human was quiet for a moment. On Earth, we have a saying, we fear what we don't understand. When humans first went into space, we imagined aliens would be terrifying monsters. Instead, we found the conquered, being so gentle by our standards that our mere presence frightens them. Different evolutionary paths, Jack said. Your world made you strong. Ours made us cautious. And now chemistry bridges the gap. Moore smiled. It's an unusual solution, but if it works. By the end of the day, the council had approved preliminary trade agreements and cultural exchange protocols. As the drug began to wear off, Jack noticed his perception of the humans slowly shifting back, their movements seeming more sudden, their voices more jarring. But something had changed permanently in his understanding. That evening, he met again, with Samantha to review the results. It was a success, she said, reviewing the meeting recordings. Communication efficiency increased by 67% compared to previous human interactions. And the council members? Most reported positive experiences. 3 mentioned headaches afterward, and 2 noted feeling unusually fascinated by the humans. She frowned. That's something to monitor. Meaning? The drug might do more than just remove fear. It might create a sort of artificial affinity. She looked concerned. We need to be careful about dependence or overuse. Jack nodded thoughtfully. Have your team start working on refinements, and begin training programs for diplomats who will work regularly with humans. We need to develop natural tolerance alongside chemical assistance. Samantha packed up her data. There's something else, sir. The humans have requested our formula. Why? They don't fear us. No, but they've realized how they affect us. Ambassador, Moore thinks their scientists might develop complementary treatments, ways to make humans less triggering to conquered species. Jack felt a new respect for the humans. They would change themselves to accommodate us? Apparently so. It seems they're as eager for this partnership to work as we are. As Samantha left, Jack looked out at the stars again. Perhaps these strange, strong creatures from a death world would bring more than just their physical power to the conquered. Perhaps they would bring a new perspective that no drug could provide, the willingness to change oneself for the benefit of others. 3 months passed since the successful council meeting. The space station Harmony had been chosen as the main meeting place between humans and conquered species. The station orbited a neutral star system on the edge of conquered space, making it easy for both groups to reach. Jack Harris stepped off his ship onto Harmony's main dock. 2 guards walked with him, both taking their doses of perspective before leaving the ship. The drug had been improved in the past months. The new version caused fewer headaches and worked more smoothly. Chancellor Harris, welcome to Harmony. A tall human woman named Susan Garcia greeted him. She was the station's human administrator. Ambassador Moore is already here with the Earth delegation. Jack shook her hand without hesitation. He took perspective regularly now for human meetings and had developed a tolerance that allowed him to function well while on the drug, thank you, Administrator Garcia. How are the preparations for the trade summit? On schedule, she replied. We have representatives from 17 human corporations and 22 conquered trading guilds arriving tomorrow. They walked through the station's wide corridors. Harmony had been designed with both humans and concord species in mind. The hallways were wide enough for larger species. The gravity could be adjusted in different sections, and the air mix was comfortable for most breathing types. Jack noticed several humans working alongside conquered maintenance staff. Integration seems to be progressing well. Susan nodded. Better than expected. Your perspective drug has made a huge difference, and our people have started the first trial runs of our own adaptations. This was new information. You've developed your treatment already? Initial versions, Susan said. We call it moderation. It's a combination of gene therapy and chemical treatments that reduce some of our more intimidating features. Lower muscle density, modified pheromones, adjusted movement patterns. Nothing that compromises our health, but enough to make us less frightening to your people. I'd like to meet these adapted humans, Jack said with interest. Ambassador Moore is one of them, Susan replied. He volunteered for the first trial. They arrived at the conference room where Greg Moore waited. Jack immediately noticed the difference. The human moved more smoothly, with less of the sudden jerky motions that triggered prey instincts. His stance was less imposing, shoulders held in a way that minimized his physical presence. Chancellor Harris, Greg said, his voice softer than Jack remembered. Good to see you again. Ambassador, you look different. Greg smiled. Feel any different around me? Jack realized he did. Though he was on perspective, there was an additional layer of comfort he hadn't experienced with humans before. The treatment works. Early version, Greg explained. Our scientists are refining it. Some humans find it uncomfortable. It goes against our natural movements. But for those of us in diplomatic roles, it's worth the adjustment. The 3 of them sat down to discuss the upcoming trade summit. Jack was impressed by how well the combination of perspective and the human's moderation treatment worked together. For short periods, he could almost forget he was dealing with a species that had evolved on a death world. After the meeting, Jack met with Dr. Samantha Wright, who had relocated to Harmony to continue her research. Have you analyzed the human treatment? Jack asked as they walked through the station's garden area, designed to help both species feel at ease. Yes, Samantha said. It's quite impressive. Their genetic modifications are temporary but effective. The chemical treatments alter their muscle response patterns. Together, they make humans register as non-threatening to most Concord nervous systems. Side effects for them? Reduced physical performance, slower reaction times, some discomfort as their bodies fight against the imposed limitations. Samantha looked troubled. They're essentially dulling the very adaptations that helped them survive on Earth. Jack considered this a significant sacrifice on their part. One that matches our own, Samantha reminded him. Both our peoples are temporarily changing themselves to accommodate the other. The next day, the trade summit began. More than 50 representatives from both human and conquered worlds gathered on Harmony. All conquered representatives took perspective before the meetings. All human delegates had undergone at least preliminary moderation treatments. The results were remarkable. Trade agreements that might have taken months to negotiate were completed in days. Cultural exchange programs were established. Scientific cooperation protocols were signed. Without the barrier of instinctive fear, the two civilizations found they had much to offer each other. During a break, Jack overheard two conquered traders talking. I don't understand why we feared them so much, one said. These humans are fascinating, their art, their music, their ideas, all shaped by their harsh world. I've started collecting human literature, the other confessed. Their stories are so vivid, so full of conflict and emotion. Nothing like our careful, harmonious tales. Jack frowned slightly at this conversation. It reminded him of Samantha's warning about unintended side effects of perspective, the risk of creating artificial fascination with humans. He made a note to discuss this with her later. That evening, a cultural exhibition had been planned. Human musicians would perform alongside conquered artists. Jack arrived early and found Greg already there, looking less comfortable than usual. Is something wrong, Ambassador? Jack asked. Greg rubbed his arm where a medical patch was visible under his sleeve. The moderation treatment is wearing off earlier than expected. I may need to excuse myself. Why not simply apply another dose? Consecutive doses aren't recommended yet. The effects can become unpredictable. Greg looked embarrassed. I don't want to risk any incidents. Jack understood. Without the treatment, Greg would revert to his natural human state, the state that triggered fear in conquered species. Perhaps we should postpone the exhibition. No need, Greg said firmly. My team will attend. I'll watch from my quarters via video feed. As Greg left, Jack felt a new appreciation for the human effort to make this relationship work. They were willingly limiting their natural abilities, accepting discomfort and inconvenience, all to prevent causing fear in their new galactic neighbors. The cultural exhibition was a success. Human music, with its driving rhythms and emotional intensity, provided an interesting contrast to the mathematical precision of Concord compositions. The audience, all under the influence of perspective, responded with enthusiasm rather than alarm to the sometimes loud and energetic human performances. Later that night, Jack discussed the day's events with Samantha in her lab. We're making progress, he said. But I worry we're becoming too dependent on chemical solutions. Samantha nodded. Both drugs were meant to be bridges, not permanent supports. Eventually, we need to find a way for our species to interact naturally. Is that possible? Can we overcome millions of years of evolution? I believe we can, Samantha said. Today, I saw conquered children meeting human children for the first time. The children showed much less fear than adults, even without perspective. Their brains are more flexible, more open to new experiences. Jack felt hope at this observation. So the next generation might not need drugs to see humans as people, rather than predators. Exactly. And human children raised among us might naturally learn to move and behave in ways that don't trigger our fear responses. Samantha smiled. The drugs give us time for cultural adaptation to take place naturally. Jack looked out the viewport, at the stars. A future where we can meet as equals without chemistry between us. That's the goal, Samantha agreed. In the meantime, we have perspective and moderation to help us build bridges. 1 year had passed since the creation of Harmony Station. Human integration into the Galactic Concord was moving forward with both success and challenges. The station had grown in size and importance, now hosting permanent residents from both human and conquered worlds. Jack Harris sat in his office on Harmony reviewing reports. His role had changed in recent months. He now served as the Concord's main ambassador to humans, spending most of his time on the station. There was a gentle knock on his door. "Come in," Jack called. Dr. Samantha Wright entered, looking concerned. "We need to talk about perspective." Jack gestured to the seat across from his desk. "What's the problem?" "We're seeing side effects from long-term use," Samantha explained, placing her datapad on the desk. "Nothing immediately dangerous, but troubling patterns among frequent users." Jack leaned forward. Many Concord diplomats and traders had been taking perspective regularly for months now. "What kind of patterns?" "3 main issues," Samantha said, displaying brain scans on her pad. First, diminishing effectiveness. Users need larger doses to achieve the same effect after repeated use. "That's not unexpected with most drugs," Jack noted. "True. But the second issue is more concerning. Some users are developing what we're calling human fixation, an unhealthy fascination with humans that goes beyond normal cultural interest." Jack remembered the conversation he had overheard months ago at the trade summit. Examples? Conquered diplomats collecting human items compulsively, others adopting human gestures and speech patterns, some even requesting cosmetic modifications to appear more human-like. Samantha looked troubled. It's as if perspective doesn't just remove fear, it sometimes creates attraction. And the third issue? Withdrawal symptoms when stopping regular use. Not physical addiction exactly, but psychological dependence. Users report feeling uncomfortable around humans without the drug, even after months of regular interaction that should have built natural tolerance. Jack frowned. Recommendations? We need to limit perspective use to essential diplomatic functions only. No recreational or casual use, and we need to rotate personnel so no one takes it too frequently. Samantha hesitated. We also need to be more serious about developing non-chemical approaches. Before Jack could respond, his communication device chimed. "Excuse me," he said, answering the call. The face of Susan Garcia, Harmony's human administrator, appeared on the small screen. "Chancellor Harris, we have a situation in the Central Market. A Concord trader had a severe reaction to a human. Medical is responding, but you should be aware." "Was anyone hurt?" Jack asked, immediately concerned. "No injuries, but it caused quite a scene. The trader wasn't on perspective, and the human hadn't taken moderation recently." Susan looked stressed. "First public incident we've had in months." "I'll be right there," Jack said, ending the call. He turned to Samantha. "It seems your concerns are timely." They hurried to the Central Market area, where a small crowd had gathered. Medical personnel were attending to a Siluran trader who lay trembling on the floor. Nearby stood a human man looking distressed. "What happened?" Jack asked Susan, who met them at the scene. "The human, Brad Wilson, is a new arrival," Susan explained quietly. "He hasn't been fully briefed on protocols yet. He reached across the Siluran stall to examine some goods, and his sudden movement triggered a fear response. The Siluran collapsed immediately. Jack noticed Brad was larger than most humans he'd seen on the station, probably newly arrived from Earth without any moderation treatments. "Is the trader going to be all right?" Samantha asked, watching the medical team. "Yes, they've administered a stabilizer, but this highlights the problem. We've become so dependent on both perspective and moderation that we've grown careless about natural interactions." The incident was resolved quickly, but news spread throughout the station. By evening, several Concord residents had requested transfers back to their homeworlds, and some human merchants reported decreased business. Jack called an emergency meeting with both human and Concord leadership. "Today's incident shows we've become too reliant," On our chemical solutions, he began. Both our peoples have been using drugs as a substitute for genuine adaptation. Greg Moore, who had been promoted to Human Integration Director, nodded in agreement. Moderation use is causing problems for us as well. Some humans report feeling disconnected from their own bodies. Others have developed coordination problems after multiple treatments. What do you propose? Asked Lori Peterson, who now served as Concord security chief for the station. Jack looked at Samantha, who stepped forward. We need a more comprehensive approach, she said. Instead of just masking our biological responses, we need to retrain them. I've been working with human behavioral scientists on a program that combines limited chemical use with exposure therapy and cultural education. Exposure therapy? Lori asked, looking skeptical. Gradually increasing contact with humans in controlled settings, starting with the least triggering individuals and situations, Samantha explained. Combined with awareness techniques that help conquered species recognize and manage their instinctive responses. Greg nodded enthusiastically. And on our side, humans would learn specific movement protocols and non-threatening body language that minimize fear triggers, without requiring chemical suppression of our natural capabilities. A training program instead of a drug program, Jack summarized. But this would take longer than simply taking a pill before meetings. Yes, Samantha agreed, but the results would be more permanent and healthier for everyone. The group discussed the proposal late into the night. There were concerns about the transition period, the potential for more incidents like today's, and the economic impact of slowing down human-conquered integration. Finally, Jack made a decision. We'll implement the training program immediately, while gradually reducing dependence on both drugs. Essential diplomatic functions will still use chemical assistance when necessary, but with the clear goal of eliminating that need over time. In the weeks that followed, new protocols were established throughout Harmony Station. Special training areas were created where conquered species could practice being around humans in safe, controlled environments. Human residents learned specific movement patterns and vocal tones that minimized fear responses. The central market was redesigned with wider aisles and clear sight lines, so conquered shoppers could see humans approaching from a distance. Human living quarters were placed in separate sections from conquered housing, with common areas in between where both groups could interact by choice. Jack himself participated in the training program, working to build natural tolerance to human presence without relying on perspective. It was uncomfortable at first. His instincts still screamed danger when a human moved suddenly or spoke too loudly. But gradually, he found himself needing smaller doses of the drug, and eventually none at all for brief meetings. 1 month after the new program began, Jack met Greg for lunch without taking perspective beforehand. He still felt an undercurrent of unease, but it was manageable. "How are you doing without your chemical crutch?" Greg asked with a smile. He too had reduced his moderation treatments, though he still moved with careful precision. "Better than expected," Jack admitted. "Though I notice you're still moderating your movements." "Some habits are worth keeping," Greg replied. "Just because I can move quickly doesn't mean I should, when I know it causes discomfort." Jack appreciated this consideration. Perhaps the real solution was never going to be purely chemical or purely behavioral. Maybe it's about meeting in the middle, both of us adapting to each other. Greg nodded. On Earth we have a saying, good fences make good neighbors. Sometimes acknowledging boundaries helps us cross them more successfully. As they continued their meal, Jack felt cautiously optimistic. The path forward would not be easy, but for the first time, he believed, humans and the conquered could build a relationship that didn't require either side to fundamentally change who they were. 5 years had passed since humans first contacted the Galactic Concord. The space station Harmony had grown into a thriving city in space, with over 20,000 residents, nearly half human and half various Concord species. What had begun as a cautious experiment was now a success story told throughout the galaxy. Jack Harris walked through Harmony's main garden, enjoying the mix of earth plants and alien flora that filled the space with colors and scents. At 75 cycles old, he had officially retired from his position as Concord ambassador to humans. Today was his last official duty, giving a tour to a group of new diplomatic students. "Chancellor Harris," called a voice from behind him. Jack turned to see Ben Collins, a human teacher from Harmony's first school, approaching with a group of 20 young students following behind him. Half were human children, the other half were youngsters from various conquered species. "Not Chancellor anymore," Jack reminded Ben with a smile. "Just plain Jack now." "Old habits," Ben said with a grin. "These are my students from the cultural exchange class. They were hoping to meet you before you leave." Jack looked at the children with interest. These were the first generation to grow up in the mixed environment of Harmony. The conquered children showed none of the fear or discomfort around their human classmates that had been so common among adults just a few years ago. "Hello, everyone," Jack said. "I'm very pleased to meet you." A small Filian girl with blue fur raised her hand. "Sir, is it true you needed medicine to talk to humans when they first came?" Jack nodded. "Yes, that's true. We called it perspective. Most conquered adults found humans very frightening because they evolved on a world much more dangerous than our home planets. I'm not scared of humans," the girl said proudly, glancing at her human classmates. "That's because you're smarter than we were," Jack told her with a wink. "You learned early that different doesn't mean dangerous." A human boy raised his hand next. "My dad says he had to take something called moderation when he first worked here. What was that?" "Moderation was a treatment that helped humans appear less threatening to conquered species," Jack explained. "It made humans move more slowly and change some of their natural behaviors." "That sounds awful," the boy said, making a face. Jack laughed. "Your dad and other humans made that sacrifice so we could build this place together. But you're right, it wasn't an ideal solution." Ben guided the children to sit on benches around a small fountain. "Chancellor Harris, sorry Jack, is going to tell you how Harmony changed over the years." Jack sat on a stone bench facing the children. The first year was the hardest. Both humans and concord species relied heavily on drugs to interact. By the second year, we realized this wasn't sustainable. That's when we started the Natural Integration Program. "What's that?" asked another concord child. "Instead of using chemicals to change how we saw each other, we learned to understand our differences through education and practice," Jack explained. "Humans learned which of their movements triggered fear in conquered species. Conquered members learned that human strength and speed weren't necessarily threatening." "Did it work right away?" a human girl asked. "No," Jack admitted. "We had many challenges. Some people on both sides wanted to give up. But something interesting happened with children like you." The students leaned forward with interest. While adults struggled to overcome their instincts, children adapted quickly. Human children naturally learned to move more carefully around their conquered friends. Conquered children grew up seeing humans as normal, not frightening. Ben nodded. That's why education became so important to Harmony's success. Sometimes the oldest had to learn from the youngest. One of the conquered children, a Valoran with silver skin, raised a tentacle. "Do people still take the special drugs now?" "Very rarely," Jack said. "Mainly for first contact situations with humans who have just arrived from Earth or for concord species who have never met humans before. After a few weeks of adaptation training, most people don't need the drugs anymore." "My mom says I move differently at school than at home," said a human boy with dark curly hair. "She says I turn down my human when I'm with my concord friends." Jack smiled. "That's exactly right. You've learned to adjust your behavior naturally without drugs. That's much better than moderation. You're still fully yourself. You've just learned when to use your human strength and speed and when to be more gentle." As the children asked more questions, Jack noticed Dr. Samantha Wright entering the garden. Though now in her 60s, she still worked as Harmony's chief medical officer. She waved but stayed back, not wanting to interrupt the class. After the children left for their next lesson, Samantha joined Jack by the fountain. "How does it feel telling our story to the next generation?" she asked. "Satisfying," Jack replied. "Those children are the real success. They see each other as people first, not as humans or aliens." Samantha nodded. "Remember how worried we were about drug dependence? Last month, we had only 3 prospective prescriptions for the entire station, all for new arrivals. And moderation? The treatment version was discontinued 2 years ago. Some humans still use a mild variant when they first arrive, but most just take the behavioral training course instead. Jack looked around the garden, where humans and conquered species sat together, walked together, and talked together, all without chemical assistance. We were so focused on the biological barriers, he said thoughtfully. We thought chemistry was the only answer. But it turned out consciousness could overcome instinct after all. With a little help at first, Samantha reminded him. The drugs gave us the time we needed to develop better solutions. A group of conquered diplomats walked by, deep in conversation with several humans. Jack noticed that while the humans clearly moderated their movements, they did so with a natural ease that came from practice rather than medication. Similarly, the conquered officials showed no signs of fear or discomfort, despite being medication-free. "Will you miss Harmony?" Samantha asked. "Very much," Jack admitted, "but I'm needed back home." The Conquered is considering opening membership to other Deathworld species that humans have introduced us to. Apparently, Earth isn't the only challenging planet that produced intelligent life. "More scary neighbors?" Samantha asked with a smile. "Potentially, but thanks to humans, we now know how to welcome them properly." Jack stood up. "Maybe without chemical help this time?" As the artificial sunlight began to dim in the garden, signaling evening in the station's cycle, Jack took a final look around. 5 years ago, he had needed drugs just to shake hands with Ambassador Moore. Now thousands of humans and conquered citizens lived and worked together daily with no medication at all. The special drugs had been necessary at first, a bridge between very different evolutionary histories. But what had truly changed the relationship between humans and the Concord wasn't chemistry. It was the willingness of both sides to learn, to adapt, and to see past biology to the people beneath. Jack left the garden and headed toward the docking bay where his ship waited. As he walked, he passed dozens of humans and Concord species interacting naturally, comfortably, as if they had always been neighbors in the galaxy. The drugs had opened the door, but it was understanding that had allowed everyone to walk through it together.